Okay, so we're going to work with some acupressure points that one of them is really close to the spine, close to where the neck meets the top of the shoulder. One is right in the middle of the top of the shoulder. It's a very famous one called gallbladder 21. And then one is right where the triangle meets of the clavicle, acromion process, and spine of the scapula. But it's not going to be on the bony part. It's going to be, you're going to walk medially from the bony part right into the soft depression there. So these can be really nice to work with bilaterally at the same time. So on her, where those bones come together, the soft part, the most lateral one is right there. And I'm going to use some really gentle pressure down towards her feet. And you don't have to get to the client's, deepest ideal pressure with this type of technique to be effective. It's not like releasing a trigger point or an adhesion where getting to that, whatever the client says is the optimal depth is going to release it better. I can just get just deep enough to engage with the point and supportive with my fingers around her shoulders. Depending on the size of your hand and the size of the client, that's going to look a little different, but just so that you're nice and soft somewhere and not just like floating in the air like this, because you'll be able to more sensitively feel what you're doing. If you can't actually feel the release or you're not quite sure how long to hold it, you could literally watch a clock and just hold this for 2 minutes. And that'll just be a good starting point. If you start practicing holding it for 2 minutes, you'll start to feel changes in the softness of the tissue, the client's breathing, and the therapeutic pulse. And then you can modify if you're holding it a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. But just as a starting point, if you're not quite sure how long to make this effective, you could start there. And then that gallbladder 21 is going to be halfway between the lateral acromion process and the midline of the spine, right on top of the shoulders on trapezius. You can press this straight down towards her feet. There's also a very common trigger point here, trigger point of the traps, so that you could literally, if you feel a trigger point there, you could also use a pincer grasp and squeeze it or press downward. This point is contraindicated in pregnancy. So if the client is pregnant, it's okay to massage their shoulders, but you don't want to hold just this acupressure point and use just a lot of pressure on it. And hers has actually softened quite a bit with the other warm-up work we did and the muscle energy technique. So it's actually much softer than we started already, and I can feel a therapeutic pulse. And when you start to feel a therapeutic pulse, what you'll often feel is some kind of like resistance, like you feel some kind of pressure in there, but it doesn't quite feel relaxed and even like waves. It feels kind of like some kind of, a little bit like a subtle jerking kind of emotion. And if you just patiently hold and you're not fighting against it, but you're just calmly sitting there listening, it'll start to even out. And in fact, what it often does is gets more tense first and then releases. And then you'll feel that it's like this relaxing kind of a flowing kind of a pulse. And if you don't feel that, that's completely fine. You might just feel the tissue soften where you're at, or you might notice the client starting to take deeper, more relaxed breaths. And then the last one is closest to her neck. And again, if you press really deeply in this area, there are actually nerves. And actually you can, later on when we have more advanced palpation skills, we'll actually release the first rib in this area. So you can get actually all the way to the top of the first rib. So you don't want to use like a pointy kind of pressure straight down to her feet with a lot of pressure in this area. You can be with the flat of your thumb, and you can be very gentle here. So this point, you're going to be much more gentle than that middle of the traps point where we were just at. Very good.